Good morning internet, I'm going to do a little tier list about the Parasite Energy in Parasite Eve II, because I love this game. I've been playing it ever since it came out, around 23 years ago, so what I say may or may not have some merit, and it would be a great excuse to document some knowledge on this game. It's jam-packed with interactions, and the spells are really contributing to that fact, and there's a lot to say about it, so you guys can also participate on that in the comments or on Discord, just join it. It's not optional, we will find you one way or another. Disclaimer first, this is highly anecdotal, just like any tier list really. People have their own metrics and playstyle they will rate these on. Speedrunners for instance may rate something lower solely because it's hard to get and only accessible late game. We will just assume you have access to these all the time. A little rundown on what the tiers here mean. I'm more a fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh format with numbers. I'm not a fan of letters S, SS plus, A minus. What in the f does that even mean? It's a lot more clear this way, because 0 always means it's so good that it trivializes the existence of the others. 1 is the best in the game, 2 is mid, the next best, or rather 3 is mid, weak is self-explanatory, and you can already see I made a tier about buffs and how I can't rate them. We could start with these. I would put the buffs down here, because this one, Antibody, it's basically giving you room for more mistakes. You can in this game also just decide to not take damage, because the movement is pretty great in this one. You can dodge and trivialize so much with just using your legs. So this one is just giving you room for more mistakes. And energy shot kind of depends on the weapon really. So I don't know, I can't put them up here. I don't know how to rate this one. Otherwise I will start from top to bottom. Necrosis is pretty insane. Continuous poison damage, which will accumulate to quite a bit. You know how it goes. I had a bad day once, and that Chaser boss eventually died out of poisoning. I couldn't reach him really, and this thing just did the job for me. The poison ticking will also stagger the enemies out of their attacks, which is insane to me. The stingers, for instance, they can't fight back if they're poisoned. Their attacks will be cancelled from the ticking, and the ticking is faster than their attacks, so they just stay there, go back to square one, only to be interrupted by the next ticking. And that's sometimes the case with bosses too. The burner, for instance, it also can be poisoned and will be staggered out of his attacks. And eventually, from all the damage, he will also not be able to run away. So this is the best thing you can use in that case. It also has a big hitbox, so you can, for instance, clean rooms of little critters, for instance bats and such. You know the well in dry field, which will spawn bats if you check it out. I used it on the first wave of bats to kill all of them, and the second wave, without me doing anything, died too. So this thing also for some reason lingers a little bit. The staggering will also make invisible enemies visible. The amoebas die instantly to poison, and this thing is pretty cheap, and the amoebas are jam-packed with MP, so you will get a full refund for this one. It's doing a little bit too much. This spell is insane to me. Next on the same level in my opinion would be Inferno. The literal WMD, the nuke in your pocket, the insurance policy in case you're in a shady area. Area of effect, high damage, kills everything in the room, makes some rooms even meaningless. Only head back with his high MP cost, but honestly if you manage your MP well, this isn't really that expensive. You know, like refilling your MP with leveling up the spells at the right time and such. I don't know, 30 MP compared to other things you would like use in succession isn't really that expensive. Though I get why people would say this is a little bit too much for what it does. Still, high damage, kills everything. What more could you need? Sheer power. We go one level down. Apobiosis, also area of effect, does quite the damage. Not as much as Inferno, but it's cheaper. And also sometimes kills everyone in a room. Stuns the enemies on top. And also some bosses, which is crazy. Brahmin, for instance, if he opens up his chest, you will do this. He will be stunned for a second, his attack is cancelled, and then you will give him a gut punch in his chest. Pretty cool, pretty strong, so I will put it up here. Although I've been told that the stun time of the pepper spray is longer than this one. How is lightning from above weaker than some spray in a can? Explain this to me. Life Drain, which in my opinion is the poor man's Inferno. They don't have the same picture for no reason. Despite what the game tells you, it also has infinite range. It does the same amount of damage as Inferno, just with the difference that it is divided by the amount of opponents in the room, which doesn't make it that much of an ideal AoE spell. You can still use it as such if you have to deal with weak enemies. With one, like the Chaser for instance, if there's just one Chaser in the room, you can instantly kill it with this one. The amount of MP you get, HP rather, is not small, so you will fully heal with this one. And the Water Tower for instance, there are some Chasers waiting for you. You can just do this and they are dead. Suck them dry, all of it. I don't care how much they have, all of it will go to the blood bank. Last one on this tier will be Energy Ball. You spawn 3 balls in the highest level, which all do around 200 damage each, depending on the enemy. You can do quite a lot of damage on one opponent with this one. The Rook Golems, for instance, they are pretty tough. I think this is the best bet you have. Or against the stealthy invisible golems, you know how it gets mad if you hit the wrong image of it and then the next time it spawns it attacks immediately. The whole interaction doesn't matter with this spell. You cast this, he gets mad, and before he even gets to slap you, he will eat these 3 balls, and it will also cancel his attack. It does around 700, 600, 800 damage depending on if you have Ofuda or not, and it will die immediately. This is pretty high damage for a low cost, I think around 50 MP or something. The only problem with this one, and why I'm not putting it higher, is because it's not an area of effect guaranteed domain expansion damage like the other ones. So this one's just here. It's also quite unreliable. You can be very next to the opponent and these 3 balls won't smooch them at all. They will just orbit around for no reason. It's not all too reliable, so... But it still does pretty high damage, so it's up here. Pyrokinesis will kick off the next tier list. It's everybody's best friend because it's the only thing you have at the beginning. With an MP cost of 6, it's also pretty cheap, does quite the damage, shoots 3 fireballs on level 3. If you're lucky you hit 2 of them simultaneously. You can clean rooms pretty fast with spamming this one. It's pretty good. The only reason why I'm putting it down here is because Inferno with enough MP and access to it is kinda trivializing the existence of this one. Very next on the line is Combustion. Costs more than twice as much but doesn't really do twice as much damage as Pyrokinesis, but it has a little sweep effect, so you can vacuum clean the room of small fries, which is really important early on dry field and such. You can make a lot of rooms easier with this thing. It will eventually get trivialized with all the spells up here, but until then this is a good bet and does quite the damage too. We can talk about the next tier in one swoop. I would just put the healing spells up here. If you get really good at this game, you can also just decide to not take damage or a debuff in this game. So it just gives you more room for doing mistakes, just like Antibody. Some items also trivialize the existence of them. Not really, Metabolism is kinda like a safety shield against everything, and it doesn't cost much, so I would say this has its merits, but I wouldn't put it any higher than this because you can just decide to not take damage. Healing also gets trivialized at one point with Life Drain, which also does damage on top. Interesting to notice that this is the only spell you can cast outside of battle, which is pretty typical for a JRPG. I fished it up a little. I can put this thing back down, so through the magic of editing you will see this pop up immediately. Yes, Plasma in my opinion is the weakest spell in the game. If I wouldn't have a little bit of respect to the people who like this spell, I would just call it Aya giving off a little fart. Only remedied by the fact that it has the lowest MP cost in the game with 4, which is admirable. Outside of that, it has nothing. I used to cast this on the bats to make sure everything is dead around me. It has a pretty huge hitbox. But Necrosis does the job a lot better and makes also sure it dies, because it does a little bit more damage than this thing. Everything else has more range, everything else does more damage. It flips around like a pancake the Beatles in Neo Arcade. but so does Apobiosis, so there's no real use for this thing. It's the most useless spell in the game in my opinion. But that's just me. Share your opinions and not just your tier list. You can post your tier list on Discord, I would love to see it. But tell me about all the interesting interactions in this game and why you would rate something higher or lower. Like for instance, I don't know if you knew about that, but Necrosis for instance, if you poison mind sucklers and they lose their wings and go down, they run away from Aya. The game is full of stuff like that, so if you know something I don't, tell me about it, I would love to hear it. Hey, happy New Year's Eve, although I'm sure I will not upload this before that. Don't subscribe, I can't handle you guys, I think I just said this already. Ah, what else, I will just skip 2024.